Well, this is not the video that I expected to start this year off with. This is a rough time in the streaming space. This is a rough time for Twitch. This is a rough time for Twitch staff. This is a rough time for the Twitch community. As today, well, 3 days ago now, we learned that there was going to be a layoff occurring at Twitch, impacting 500 total staffers, an equivalent of 35% of their workforce. And this follows a 400-person layoff last March, which at the time represented 15% of their staff. Now, that is also kind of an interesting increase in the amount of people that were laid off. Most people do a significantly larger layoff the first time, and then a smaller one the second time, if they actually have to. And so that is cause for concern in and of itself. But I thought we would sit down here and kind of talk this through, what it means for Twitch, and more importantly, because probably the people who are going to be watching are going to be creators, what it means for you. 2 days ago, as of recording this video, Dan Clancy announced that, in fact, the leaked news to Bloomberg that 500 staffers were going to be laid off was, in fact, true. And that led to Dan Clancy doing his own stream the other day, talking about the various things that are happening at Twitch and answering questions about it in transparency, talking about things like what is going to be the future of Twitch and whether or not Amazon actually cares about Twitch and sizing and profitability and many other things. And so I thought we'd kind of organize it all here, and so you can kind of hear my perspective on it. So first and foremost, the layoff, it's happened. And from Dan's stream the other day, he did talk about sizing and profitability. And I kind of wanted to play the clip here because I think it provides an interesting thing that everybody has kind of picked up on that we'll talk about here after I play this clip.
It's quite common for tech companies to size their organization thinking about where they might be in 3 or 4 years. And of course, we have big dreams at Twitch in terms of where we're going to be and how we're going to be able to continue to grow with live streaming. However, we really need to run the company based upon where we're at today. We've implied this before, where we say we need to run it sustainably, but I'll be blunt. We aren't profitable at this point. Amazon has been extremely supportive of Twitch, and a big thing for being sustainable over time is ensuring that we don't lose money.
And that, of course, should come to the surprise of nobody, though evidently it's a surprise of everybody. Every single news outlet has been running with the headline of Twitch isn't profitable. I'll be blunt, we're not profitable, and so on as it relates to all of this. I thought it was very common knowledge that Twitch wasn't profitable, but evidently not. So just how unprofitable is Twitch? Again, I don't know the exact numbers, but from things that people have inferred or suggested, or even to have Dan Clancy himself being blunt and saying we're not profitable, my understanding is that over the last year, they may have been able to reduce the overall cost of operating the business by 30 to 40%, which means that there's still a significant hole to dig themselves out of. And we can talk about why they're in this situation and a little bit more deeply as it relates to why now, but I think that's better served for another video where I'll talk about why are we having layoffs right now? Why is everybody laying people off? And I think that there's actually a very simple answer to it, but I think that it probably warrants its own video. So instead, let's talk about how we got here. Let's talk about how we got here, because one of the things that I've also seen people say is that Dan Clancy bears no responsibility in this because it occurred before he was the CEO. And how I'll illustrate that is in how he rose to power. And again, this is just an important little bit of context that I think is valuable in the discussion. Back in 2021, COO Sarah Clemens, Chief Operating Officer Sarah Clemens, announced that she was going to exit the company in early 2022, and she in fact did. We also saw at roughly that same time as she exited, January 6, 2022, the Chief Creator Officer, Mike Aragon. Creator? Content? Forget which one he was. Content Officer. I don't know why I said creator. Chief Content Officer, Michael Aragon, also left the company. Now, we follow that up with an article here in Bloomberg from March 3rd, 2022, saying Amazon's Twitch suffers exodus of executives amid strategy fight. Interesting. And you actually see here Twitch in recent years has focused on expanding and finding new ways of making money from its streamers rather than listening to and understanding them, these people say. That strategy, they say, has alienated some hardcore users and the employees who serve them, the very people whose ingenuity and enthusiasm that made Twitch a success. Now, of course, we were all there during the pandemic when there was zero communication, where we were hearing nothing from Emmett Shear, where there was no comms on anything, and we were all kind of left to our own devices, and I was basically the only one who was trying to be out there and share information about product launches for the community. But it is also important to note that in the departure of all of these executives, who arose to power? It was Dan Clancy. And my understanding of at this time, in early 2022, roughly 90% of the company was reporting directly to him. Not the CEO, but to Dan Clancy, the president. So effectively, any decision that has come out of Twitch since 2022 has been Dan Clancy as primary decision maker and Emmett Shear as figurehead CEO who never really did anything. I think we can all probably agree on that fact about Emmett Shear in his final years. Which is perhaps why we've seen some of the kind of the same problems that have arisen time and time again, that despite the fact that Dan Clancy has been in the public, he's been out there, he's talking to creators, he's listening, he's being open and communicative. It's fantastic. I'm not discounting that, but I'm saying that there is kind of how we got to this position is based upon some decisions that are from the same people that are still there. In fact, one of the first things that we all had in interaction with Dan Clancy prior to this, I don't think anybody knew who he was the letter from President Dan Clancy on subscription revenue shares. And that, of course, led to a lot of people going, this guy's out of touch. He's another out of touch billionaire, CEO kind of character, Amazon guy. And it gave him a very, very difficult footing when he did start to be when he did become CEO and start to put himself out there and communicating with the community. But these bad decisions haven't inherently stopped. We saw last summer Twitch's new ad guidelines that seek to prevent people from having logos more than 3% of their streams. That was under Dan Clancy. We have seen the introduction of the changes to the sexual content policy that ultimately had much of the art and other categories plastered with all kinds of things that's saying, hey, how could we have possibly predicted this outcome? And then you have Drac on here who said, we told you in Berlin meetup this would happen. There was obvious reasons for that. So again, listening to the community, but still kind of operating on their own devices. And yet still, here's another example. This is the Twitch survey of somebody who is Egyptian, which does mean that they are African, but then they get an email saying I self-identified as a black creator. It's obviously not the case. And Frogan here kind of saying that she was actually trying to get this changed. I have talked to Twitch executives and the research team on multiple times about expanding their demographic survey to add Middle Eastern/North African category over the last 2 years, and they have yet to add it. So my kind of position here and why I want to talk about this is because I think it adds some level of context into why we're here, how we got here, and where we may be going. Because unless there is significantly more listening to the community, significantly more working with the community, I'm very concerned that we're going to continue to see these missteps, continue to see tiny patchworks that don't actually move the needle as much as they need to be moved. Kind of leads us to today. And so let's try to make sense of it all and contextualize what all of this information actually means. First and foremost, with the layoff occurring, the sacrifice of all of those 500 people losing their livelihoods does mean that Twitch has a little bit more wiggle room, even though they're not going to be out of the hole, and they're not, my belief is they're not going to be out of the hole for some time now, probably a number of years, does give them some wiggle room to do some positive things for creators. And so I would not be surprised to see announcements in this first half of the year that creators are particularly fond of. And that may come in the form of reducing the overall threshold for Partner Plus. That may come in the form of something I talked about last year in terms of like an affiliate plus structure. Perhaps there's other things that may launch that creators celebrate and go, yes, that's great. We love that. But that also comes with some negatives. And I expect us to, again, if I go back to my little prediction here, I think 2024 and 2025 are critical years for Twitch's long-term viability, which means many tough calls to be made. I'm sure Dan Clancy hopes that all the groundwork he put in with creators in 2023 will grant him some leeway on some of the decisions, but if the Korean news is any indication, it may be an uphill battle. And one of those things that he talked about briefly on his stream the other day was Twitch Prime and the Prime subs. And if you didn't see it, I'll play the clip for you right now.
Prime is a critical program for many streamers. We've already been looking across the company in terms of how to set us up for the long term. I think we will continue to evolve different aspects of our program, because part of what I'm trying to do is get us into a framework that can live over a long time. The size of the company is one of those things that gets us to the right size for the longer period of time. When we did Partner Plus, we structured that so that we could continue to move that threshold. We're going to keep looking across our strategy with streamers. We did this with the ads incentive program. We want to get to where we can continue to grow and adapt and change as the market changes. And so there may be other changes, but I will tell you, Prime is an important part for our viewers and our creators. So it's important for us to make sure Prime still exists in some way.
In some way. That's probably going to be more prophetic than we realize. Just to give you some context on how much that actually represents creator earnings, in the 2021 big Twitch leak, when everybody's revenue was leaked publicly, the amount that Prime resulted in people's income was about 13%. So all of Twitch income, ads, subs, bits, other ways that people earn money, Prime alone represented about 13%. Now, to put that into the context of slightly newer information, if you take a look at the top 1,000 channels, and keep in mind the data here is not perfect, but of the top 1,000 channels, the number of Prime subs is equivalent to roughly 21%. 34% of them are paid, and 45% are gifted. Again, this is the top 1,000 Twitch channels. So this doesn't take into account Tier 2 and Tier 3, but it does take into account the number overall. So if Prime were to go away one day, this is a pretty significant source of creator earnings that would go along with it, which is why I expect that there will be some level of change that either comes to that or ends up getting kind of factored in with Turbo. Again, that's probably a topic for another video. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is whether or not we are on the Titanic and have we now hit the iceberg and this ship is going down. Is Twitch safe? Is Twitch at risk of being shut down by Amazon? And again, Dan Clancy addressed the question directly on his stream. I'll play that clip for you now.
Gonna just ask, is Twitch currently at risk of getting the axe by Amazon? And the answer is emphatically no, not at all. Amazon is very bullish on Twitch. As I said, they've been investing heavily in Twitch. It is fair to say that Amazon, much like many other companies in the tech space, and I know for many of you, that's not the center of where you live, is evolving how they think about running the company in terms of resources.
Now, let's be honest. That's the only answer that Dan could have given. If Dan had said anything that waffled in any way, there would be panic in the streets, and it would have ended up becoming the thing that actually caused the death of Twitch. If the CEO goes, yeah, well, maybe, it's all over. It's all over at that point. So there's no other answer that he could have even given. So I'll give you my perspective. I'm somebody who is bullish on the future of streaming. I think that streaming's best days remain ahead of it. And I do think that Twitch probably is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. But I do have a small, tiny concern that some of the decisions that are being made and some of the rumors that I have heard may lead to changes in the relationship between Amazon and Twitch in the future. And I'll be honest in saying that as this year progresses and 2025 progresses, that may be further updated depending on moves that they actually make. Whether or not they disconnect the technology completely so that there is no video service at Twitch and they're purely a client of IVS, that would probably bring me to a slightly higher level of concern. If they do remove Prime entirely and they do end up having a first-party solution, that may bring me some level of concern to increase that number. But as it stands right now, I'm not concerned. Things run slowly in corporate America, and so I would not expect to see any major changes to or concerns of a shutdown in the next 2 to 3 years. And I will continue to provide my insight, and as I learn more from my sources and as I continue to put this picture together, I will obviously try to keep you guys informed and to say what I think is going to happen. And I can be wrong. Keep that in mind. I am not infallible. I am not a future teller, but all I can do is try to figure out exactly what may happen based upon what I'm seeing. But yes, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you're not subscribed to my newsletter, go subscribe to it. It is, again, I am biased, but I think it is fantastic for creators. And then lastly, if you do want to come watch me live, we talk about this stuff all of the time on Twitch, twitch.tv/Zach Bussey. Come check me out. I'm usually live at 5 o'clock Eastern on weekdays.